Evening's
this
topic.
evening.
We are going to be talking about what happens when you raise your child up in the way that they should go. And we know the Bible verse, when they are old, they should not depart. What happens when things go a little left or they're not always abiding by that? So we want to talk about what happens when you raise them up and they kind of detour from or deviate from that biblical base, that rearing, that teaching that we've been giving them all their lives. What happened? What do you do as parents, as a married couple? What do you do when that happens, when they deviate from that?
I think it's an interesting topic because for the most part you take out, let's just use some words, you take out 18 to 20 years of your life in raising this child, taking them to school, giving them rules, dealing with issues, dealing with problems, or any amount of time. It don't have to be 18 to 21 years, but it could be 10, 13
It could be an
years.
adolescent.
Yeah. And they got it, and you think you got it, and then they go left.
Right.
They do the opposite, almost the opposite of how you raise them, and it can become disappointing.
That it can.
I think that's the biggest thing, because it becomes disappointing to us, as a couple, that we put all this energy and we want them to do right. We have their best interest at hand,
Right.
and then they do seemingly what we believe is the opposite of how we raise them. What is our responsibility? How do we get through that as a couple, and then what do we do towards the child? Because a lot of couples, a lot of parents can hold some bitterness within, because you put all this energy into raising this child or this particular topic, and then they go astray, or they not necessarily go astray, but they do the opposite.
Right. And I will say, before we start giving you our rule of thumb and our opinion, just know that it is strictly just that, our opinion.
Right.
We cannot come into your household and tell you how to raise your children. We can't tell you how to not punish, but how to govern your home. And so this is our opinion, and hopefully it can lead and guide some of you that are looking to just find your way in that. And it just makes for a great conversation piece. So let's just talk about it. Yeah. So I think that of course, being spiritual led, spiritual minded, being, raised in a spiritual home, a Christian home, you're automatically going to continue down that path of what you've been taught, and hopefully it can be what the Bible says and not just what you've been taught, because once you get older, you do have to find out things and learn things for yourself. But as we are raising our children and training our children up in the way that they should go, I think that the best practice is, after you teach them, reteach them again and again. Revisit the rules of your household. Don't just teach them one time and say, well, I told them what to do, and I showed them how to do it. You have to revisit this. You train them up when they're toddlers. You train them up when they go through the adolescent stage. That's a whole nother stage. They don't forgot about all that other stuff that's gone out the window. You got to reteach them, revisit the conversations that y'all have had, and then they become teenagers. You got to revisit again, because now they're starting to want to date and like, and the little boys and the little girls. You're gonna have to revisit it then, and then they become young adults. You got to revisit it then. And then they become college students. Right. And then out of that, trying to find their own way, get their own apartments. You're going to constantly have to revisit. So I think that just getting upset with them. Now, the Bible does say, for us, we do go by the scripture, spare the rod and hate child. So
right.
we, so we did.
It's gonna be some spanking.
We did use some punishment, with our children growing up. Now, some of you may not. That's you. But even though you are correcting your child, sometimes they're still gonna deviate, and they're gonna deviate again and deviate again, and you want to like, Lord, what do we do? So what we did, we began. Hey Valerie.
Hey Valerie, thank you for joining us.
What we did was we just continued to pray. Now, first of all, when they were babies, we dedicated them to the Lord.
Right.
They was some say Christian. So we had a baby dedication, and so we gave our children back to the Lord, and we constantly ask God to protect our children, to guide them, because there'll be many times that they're away from us. We don't know what's going on. We don't know the type of friends that they're going to be hanging around, the type of peer pressure they're going to have. So it's good to always pray over your children and ask God to protect them and lead them and guide them, because there are sometimes you can't train them and you can't teach them the Bible way and what your morals and values and the rules of your household, and they still don't follow the directions. So I would say the first step, continue to pray over them, ask God to go with them, to keep their minds, to protect them, to lead them and guide them. So what would be?
So I like what you started out. And hey, y'all, this is what we're talking about. What happens when your child go astray, or what happens if they go contrary to what you have taught them? And I think I like you mentioned 3 R's: revisit, reteach, and remind. Because we think that, and there's some more R's. We think that, just because they heard it one time, or just because they got it as a toddler, or they got it as a teenager, now you need to reteach, and remind what your standard is, especially if you're living in a Christian household and you're trying to go by the standard of the scriptures, because there's so much coming at them. There's so much came at us, but there's so much coming at them in terms of temptation to do contrary to what their parents.
Right. Even more now.
Yeah.
Because they had a cell phone.
Yeah.
And
social media, distractions.
And we didn't have all of that.
Yeah. It took us going down the road or writing a letter to get that, but now they can be connected on the other side of the world in 3 seconds.
Yeah.
So reteach, remind, and and revisit what you have taught them and what your standard is.
Yeah.
And as long as we're on this earth, and as long as they're on this earth, you're always going to be the parent. They're going to always be the child, even when they're adults. And sometimes, and you know what, God says that we still hold that responsibility to continue with it, to get them knowledge. Yeah, peer pressure from all directions. What happened when they give in, Miss Jackson, to that peer pressure? And it causes some type of social embarrassment, or it causes some type of harm to them, or something happens. So you revisit, you remind, and you what? You revisit and you reteach what your standard is. But the most thing I think I like is restore them.
Yeah, let's talk about restoring.
Yeah.
So things. Yeah, go
ahead.
Things that
I'm gonna bring up restore. She gonna talk about it, but go ahead.
we let him have a little something.
All right.
Okay, so okay, go ahead, talk about restore.
No, you go ahead.
Okay, so when thinking about restoring your child, that's just the same as God restoring us. You know, we all have sinned and fallen short. That's right. Of His glory. So we know that we are going to go back to God and we're going to repent of our sins, and we're going to ask God to forgive us. It's the same, and God restores us. He removes that guilt, and he put His loving arms around us, and He never really takes it off. It was us that removed it. So He reminds us that He still loves us. He reminds us that He's still here. You know, He's still our protector. So when your child gets into trouble, let's just say they end up doing something and go to juvenile correction
they
facility, get locked up. They may be
get kicked out of school,
suspended,
alternative school
suspended, doing drugs.
Or they end up in the hospital because of something they did, their behavior.
Right, getting into a fight,
right,
or just stealing, even having a child out of wedlock. Just all of those things. And of course, you're as a parent, you're gonna feel bad, and you're gonna feel. Sometimes we can feel angry as a parent.
Right.
You may feel angry. You may feel, like you can't forgive.
Right.
But we have to put ourselves aside because, God may get angry at us, but He still loves us.
Right.
He still protects us. He still restores us. So if your child gets in trouble out there in the world, then you got to remember that you're still that parent. It is still your job and duty and responsibility to teach and reteach that child, to continue to protect and love them, wrap your arms around them, continue to pour into their lives. We don't know what type of peer pressure they was under. We don't know what happened. The enemy, how they got sucked in. And it is time that is when it's time to restore. When they get into trouble, it's not a time to push them away. It's a time to restore. And so Valerie said, even us as older people, some of us needs. That's right. We need to restore ourselves. We're constantly asking God for forgiveness. So why can't we give that same grace and forgiveness to our children, no matter what they do?
Right.
And what were you going to say about restoring?
To restore means to place back in a position. And one thing we got to be clear about is wrong behavior doesn't cancel out relationship. So sometimes we believe that when somebody do wrong, then a relationship stops, and it shouldn't.
Right. It shouldn't.
And just like God, when we do wrong, our relationship with Him don't stop.
That's right.
Our behavior change. And so even as a child, when a child does wrong or go opposite of what you have taught them, and they need to be reminded, reteach, and revisit, they also need to be restored. And what does restoration look like? We go into that child and let them know, although we're disappointed in their behavior, they're still our child, and we still want them to be successful.
That's right.
And even when Ms. Valerie said that, even as adults, some of us need restored because sometimes your child can do something that embarrass you publicly. And so, now you're what? Now your self-esteem is low, or something going on with you. Then the whole family the whole relationship need to be restored. Right.
And you also, as a parent, you could end up responding the wrong way, incorrect way.
No. Oh, Pastor Frank, here.
Hey, Pastor Frank, you can end up responding to your child in the wrong, out of anger,
right? And
then you're gonna have to go back and get restoration from God too, because
you
got to ask God to forgive you, because you just did wrong to your child. But if you're
Pastor Frank said, I'm traded in for a better model. Listen,
there
are no recalls.
You got to keep them.
There are no recalls when it comes out of that. You can't recall that back.
Yeah.
But so that's interesting, because sometimes that does happen a lot. And instead of restoring, because as the parent, we should have the most experience. We should have the wisdom. We should know how to deal with it. But what happens is that now we get in a place where now something's happening with inside of us, that now the behavior of the child has now gotten me to the point where I can't adequately restore. And what happens? Keep it, Pastor Fred. So what happens? How does that look? That means going to that child